Hi, I'm Joe Navarro, and welcome back to People Watching. Today I want to talk about behaviors that I've observed over the years that should say to us, pay attention, something's not right. Now, I put these together because after decades and decades of observation, these have stood out over time as being very suggestive that something is really wrong. Now, most people will not even catch these, but I think they're very important. And the first one has to do with our freeze response. I think one of the traits, evolutionary traits that we all share with other mammals is that in the presence of something that is alarming, a loud noise, the sudden appearance of an individual, or something that is very distracting, we tend to hold very still. The freeze response, of course, kept us alive through millennia because we were always surrounded by predators, archaic humans were, and so we learned to freeze so that the large cats, the large felines didn't run after us and attack us. But many times, someone will be seen all of a sudden in a hallway, and you see them just frozen in place. Sometimes a teacher will notice that a young child is sitting there, and not only are they very stoic, but they're very stiff. And I've certainly seen it in dangerous situations where a car was coming at a woman, and rather than run in one direction or another, she just froze in place. And while it's useful to have perspective and to know everything that's going on, I think the most important thing to recognize is that when you run into someone and all of a sudden they've frozen in place, that there's usually a reason for it. And obviously we should not ignore that. We should take the time to ask if they need assistance, if something happened. One day I caught myself stopped in the middle of the street in New York. As I had just entered the sidewalk, I stopped and I thought, did I put away the iron? And I just ironed my shirt in my room. So there are reasons for why we do these things, but it's something that we should look for. The next one I look for is if all of a sudden the face becomes very tense, or it loses its pallor or color. These reactions often to some external or internal cue. You could remember something, or you just get a phone call. I remember years ago receiving news that a relative had passed away. I literally not just froze, but the people I was walking with said I lost all color in my face. It became ashen. So we look for things like that tell us something significant has affected us. Obviously, it's affecting our physiology. It has restricted blood flow to the skin, which often happens when there's a threat or something terrible has happened, because the blood leaves the skin and goes to the larger muscles. So we pay attention to things like that. The other one I pay attention to is when people withdraw their lips and suck them in really tightly. And we usually only see this when there's a high degree of stress. They may be in a situation where maybe they're being asked a question and it's embarrassing, or it's something that may hurt other people if they answer it. So the lips not just disappear, but they're sucked in and tightly held together. Nothing to do with deception, but it has to do with a high degree of stress, and we see it manifest in the lips. The other behavior that I've noticed over the year is actually very rare, but it's very significant. I was at the airport one day and I found this young man in the fetal position, knees up to the chest, and just rocking back and forth. And this is a very primitive behavior. And we usually see it when someone is shocked by information or by events. And in this case, as I later found out, as I talked to him, he had missed his flight, he had missed a connection, and he now was looking at the reality that he was going to miss going home and missing a very important date. Now, like I said, you rarely run into this, but I've seen it with young people, I've seen it with teenagers, and I've seen it with grown adults when they have suffered something very significant. What I can tell you is this is an opportunity for us to show our humanity and to assist these individuals. There is emotional hijacking, there may be even physiological hijacking, which compromises them. And so they return to these primitive behaviors, such as the rocking motions, the fetal position, to help them through that stress. I found, at least in my experience, at first they didn't even recognize my words. I had to sort of break them out of what they were experiencing before they could even begin to talk. This is a serious situation. They're so overwhelmed that they've retreated into themselves. They're self-stimulating, and that's why they're rocking. And so it's something to recognize. It's not something to make fun of. And please, as with anything else, don't videotape these things and upload it. If somebody's having a panic attack or is in a situation like this, what they need is privacy and our assistance. And lastly, one of the behaviors that I often talk about in my books, I refer to as the Tepee hands, and that is when a person presents or you see them, and maybe they're not talking, but you can tell that something's not right, but they keep massaging their fingers with their hands lowered usually, and they're sort of wiggling very slowly the joints of the fingers, joint on joint. Now the joints of the fingers have more nerve endings than the skin, so that the brain knows the exact position of each digit. And so when we're under a lot of stress, and I've seen this with teenagers and even with adults who don't want to talk about something horrible they're going through, even depression, but they do this behavior, it signals that they're hurting and they are dealing with it. This is an adaptive behavior, as Paul Ekman would call it. I refer to it as a self-soothing behavior. By putting pressure on your knuckles, you're relieving the brain of that stress. So it signals that something serious is going on. Now that's to be differentiated from people that move their hands very quickly like this. People do that when they're going to Disney or they're going to go do something fun. So very slow, very deliberate, very tight hands, often indicative of something that's very wrong. So there you have it, some behaviors that are often not talked about. Obviously, you can see these at a distance, as I have. Consider that the person is undergoing something difficult and most likely emotional, and that they could use some support. So thank you for watching, and if you're interested in more of the content, please look at my book, Be Exceptional, or What Everybody is Saying. Please follow us and subscribe, and I look forward to sharing more information with you here.